Yeah, I bring them in, but hardly anybody actually. It's just more of a fun way of reminding people of Leibniz and Sir Isaac Newton. Leibniz crackers, or cookies, biscuits. And German is, what are they? Keks. Keks. The Newtons have branched out now. They've got cranberry, all the different kinds, but these are the original Big Newton. Oh, that piece, if you heard it, by the way, was from the opera that Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote. You've heard of Rousseau. I think everybody's heard of Rousseau. It's one of those philosophers that everybody's heard about, primarily because of his social contract philosophy, which I have a theory about, which I think is hilarious, and I'll share it with you, of course. Rousseau was born in 1712 and died in 1774, I think. Let's see where. 78. So we had our revolution in 76. French had their revolution in 1789. Yes? So now, the French Revolution was based on his social contract theory. That's what the revolution tried to establish. But now here's the neat thing. He started out as an opera composer. If you were listening as you came in, that was from his one opera that I guess was his most famous one. The Divine of the Village, the whatever, but not very popular, actually. It was okay. People liked it, went to it. He was a popular composer, but not famous. And so he wrote to his friend Voltaire. You folks have heard of Voltaire? No? Nobody had to read Tartuffe in high school? Tartuffe or Candide? No? There's some of his works. Well, Voltaire is, it's actually not his name. His real name was Francois Marie Arouet, however the French might say it. Remember, they don't pronounce their vowels for some reason. It's one of the things I hate about the French. Like beau. How do you spell beau? B-E-A-U, right? But when we pronounce it in English, we say beau, which is B-O. Wouldn't that be how we would spell it? So, it seems to me, but beau is how the French say B-E-A-U. I'm not sure. Do we have any words in English that have E-A-U that aren't French, like bureau, which...
I mean, they would have all been derived from French, I imagine.
Yeah, I think so.
So, I mean, you look at beautiful, it's the same organizational letters, just pronunciated differently.
Yeah, and that's, well, beau is beautiful in French. But in any case, he became famous, and because he was a rebel, he actually had to leave France and went to England for a while. And when he went to France, he was a poet, or when he went to England, he was a poet, and when he came back, he was a philosopher. He enjoyed the open community in England and learned a lot from the liberal situation that was there at the time. right? They weren't burning anybody at the stake and things. And so he was able to really enjoy himself while he was there. But then he was a critic, and in any case, Rousseau was a friend of his, and that's kind of interesting and controversial because a lot of people think that Voltaire and Rousseau hated one another. Because when you look at their letters, they're constantly calling one another names and cussing one another out and so on. The thing is, they wrote a lot of letters, and if you read those letters, they strike me as two friends who were just teasing the heck out of one another. You know, as you know, I mean, if you look them up and read this kind of stuff. I think you could. Is that big enough for you to actually see it? It doesn't get bigger for some reason. I might have too many things open. But if you read through these, you can find them. There's actually quite a few on the internet, and they say nasty things to one another. So a lot of people think they didn't like one another. The way I look at it is like, these are clearly two people that liked one another and were just nasty to one another because that was fun for them. But Rousseau asked Voltaire, how do you become famous? Because he was not succeeding very well, right? And Voltaire said, easy, write books that say exactly the opposite of what everybody believes. And you'll become famous, right? And so what does Rousseau do? If we look at the books that he writes, let's see if we could get down bibliography, I guess. Return to Paris. Geneva, he got in trouble too. Fugitive back in Paris. Influences.
There's a hyperlink on the left side to the words.
Oh, thanks. Not that smart, but yeah. So here we go. So this is Rousseau, and if you look at what are some of the famous ones? Emile. They actually still teach this in schools of education in the United States, and it's a book that is about the best kind of education. And according to Rousseau, what do you think is the best kind of education? No education. Just the opposite of what everyone would think, right? You know, don't send kids to school. It ruins them. Actually, just let them grow up in the street. And by the way, this is one of the reasons I don't really like Rousseau, is because he had lots of kids that were not his kids. What do they call them? Bastards, I guess, right? And he didn't do anything to help them either. Illegitimate. Yes, there you go. That covers both male and female, right? You know, because I don't. Because, you know, he didn't get married, he didn't have any responsibility for his kids, even though he had kids. And so, in a way, that was precisely the way he treated his own kids, was don't even help them, just kick them out of the house. And if they survive, then they've learned enough to go on, you know, and if not, well, they obviously weren't fit for the world, right?
That's kind of funny. It shouldn't be funny, but it's kind of funny.
But it really depresses me about him that he was really that kind of thoughtless person. And one of his experiments, apparently, was to put a child in a closet and raise it in a closet.
Oh, to see what language it
to
speaks?
see what language it speaks. And when it came out, it didn't speak any language at all.
That's so sad.
And he thought it was going to speak French. Because of course, French is like the natural language. Everybody else that speaks something else has been corrupted by another environment or something. But so, education, the best education is no education. The social contract. So what makes his version, remember we've got Hobbes, the social contract leads to a monarchy, right? That's the best form of government. Locke gives us, checks and balances, so that you don't have, the monarch doing whatever it wants, et cetera. And of course ours, as we discussed already, thanks to Jefferson being a fan of Locke, pretty much uses that as the idea. But Rousseau's idea of the social contract is based on his philosophy that the state of nature, remember for both Hobbes and for Locke, the state of nature is a horrible place, basically, especially for Hobbes. It's nasty, brutish, and short, a dog-eat-dog world. And we need a government in order to keep us from killing one another, and stealing one another's stuff, and so on. And for Locke, the main difference is, it gets too complex, and so we need a government, but also to protect your life, liberty, and your property, right? Rousseau feels that the best life we could live is the state of nature, in the state of nature. And in fact, we get this philosophical view about the native being really, the best kind of life. And about that time, of course, you've got the natives in the colonies, and they're by Rousseau, he puts them on his ideal life. This is the way man was meant to live, as natives living in small little communities in the woods, basically, right? That's the best kind of life. And then when we get government corrupts. It's a corrupt system. It corrupts people. It creates power. Power corrupts people, etc., etc. So the best contract is one where everyone completely has their own vote, their own power, etc. And in fact, the French Revolution tries to put that into effect, basically become a democracy of everyone gets an equal vote. And by the way, that totally collapsed into what's called the Terror, with Robespierre using the guillotine. Yes, everyone's heard of the guillotine. It's not a Gillette shaver. It's
It kind of is.
Well, yeah, it kind of is. Yes, yes.
I guess you're right.
Better than an axe. Better than an axe.
Unless you're the last person that day.
Well, you know what's funny about that is the last person.
That's a good point.
That had their head chopped off in Iceland was Agnes Magnusdóttir. She had her head chopped off. She was a murderess back in 1830. And you know what's really neat about that is you can look up the axe. So there's the axe. That's just the head. So they got it in the museum. So if you want to see the axe, they had to import it from Denmark. They didn't have their own axe. to chop anybody's head off in Iceland, so they had to order it from Denmark. And so that's just kind of interesting. But thanks to Rousseau, the French, well, actually Robespierre, ends up with using the guillotine to chop people's heads off. And anybody know what happened to Robespierre?
Got chopped off in a guillotine?
By his
Head
own squad.
chopped off by the guillotine. So yeah, that's kind of cool, I think, to find that. So basically, I'm suggesting that the social contract of Rousseau is written as a book that he says just the opposite of